On April 30, 1945, deep within his bunker in Berlin, Adolf Hitler, the Führer of Nazi Germany and architect of the Holocaust, took his own life as the Soviet army closed in on the German capital. Hitler's death marked the definitive end of the Third Reich, a regime that had plunged the world into the deadliest conflict in history and committed atrocities on an unprecedented scale. This narrative explores the final days of Adolf Hitler, the circumstances surrounding his death, and the profound impact his demise had on Germany and the world.
Adolf Hitler, born on April 20, 1889, in Braunau am Inn, Austria, rose to power in Germany during the 1920s and 1930s, becoming Chancellor in 1933 and establishing a totalitarian regime. Under his leadership, Nazi Germany embarked on a path of aggressive expansionism, leading to the outbreak of World War II in 1939. Hitler's ideology of racial purity and his pursuit of Lebensraum, living space, for the German people led to the systematic genocide of 6 million Jews and millions of others in the Holocaust. By 1945, after years of war, Nazi Germany was on the brink of total collapse. The Allies, having landed in Normandy in June 1944, were advancing from the west, while the Soviet Red Army was closing in from the east. Berlin, the heart of the Third Reich, was under siege, and Hitler's once vaunted Wehrmacht was in tatters.
In the final months of the war, Hitler's mental and physical health deteriorated significantly. He was increasingly paranoid, isolated, and consumed by the belief that Germany had been betrayed by his generals and allies. As the Red Army encircled Berlin in April 1945, Hitler retreated to the Führer bunker, a reinforced underground shelter beneath the Reich Chancellery, where he would spend his last days. Despite the dire situation, Hitler refused to flee Berlin or negotiate a surrender, insisting that his loyal followers fight to the death. The city was in ruins, bombed relentlessly by Allied forces, and the German military was overwhelmed. Within the bunker, Hitler was surrounded by his closest aides, including his longtime mistress Eva Braun, whom he married on April 29, 1945, just hours before their deaths. Hitler's closest confidants, aware of the inevitable defeat, urged him to escape to the mountains of Bavaria or to negotiate a truce. However, Hitler, refusing to face the humiliation of capture, resolved to take his own life rather than be paraded as a trophy by the Allies.
On April 30, 1945, with Soviet forces only blocks away from the Reich Chancellery, Hitler and Eva Braun withdrew to their private quarters in the Führer bunker. According to witnesses, including Hitler's personal secretary Traudl Junge and his valet Heinz Ling, the couple bid farewell to their staff before retreating behind closed doors. At around 3:30 p.m., a gunshot was heard from inside the room. When Hitler's aides entered, they found him dead on the sofa, a gunshot wound to his right temple, with a 7.65 mm Walther PPK pistol at his side. Eva Braun had ingested cyanide and lay dead beside him. Following Hitler's orders, their bodies were carried up to the garden outside the bunker, doused with gasoline, and set on fire in an attempt to prevent them from falling into Soviet hands. The remains were hastily buried in a shallow crater left by a bomb, but the Soviets quickly discovered the site after taking Berlin. Hitler's death was officially announced by German radio on May 1, 1945, and the news spread rapidly. The world reacted with a mixture of relief and disbelief, relief that the war in Europe was finally drawing to a close and disbelief that the man responsible for so much suffering had met such an ignoble end.
Hitler's death marked the collapse of the Third Reich. In the days that followed, German forces across Europe surrendered en masse, And on May 7, 1945, Germany unconditionally surrendered to the Allies, bringing an end to World War II in Europe. The Nazi regime, which had promised a 1,000-year Reich, had lasted barely 12 years, leaving behind a legacy of destruction, genocide, and horror. The aftermath of Hitler's death was complex. In the immediate sense, it signaled the end of Nazi Germany, but the ramifications of his regime's atrocities would be felt for generations. The Nuremberg trials, which began in November 1945, sought to bring Nazi war criminals to justice, although many of Hitler's top officials, including Heinrich Himmler and Joseph Goebbels, had already taken their own lives to avoid capture. For Germany, Hitler's death marked the beginning of a long and painful process of denazification, reconstruction, and reconciliation. The country was divided into occupation zones, and Berlin, the city Hitler had once envisioned as the capital of his world empire, was left in ruins. The scars of the war and the Holocaust would shape German identity for decades, influencing the nation's politics, culture, and foreign relations. Hitler's death also gave rise to numerous conspiracy theories, with some claiming that he had escaped to South America or elsewhere. Despite the overwhelming evidence, including the discovery of his dental remains by the Soviets, these theories persisted in certain circles, reflecting the difficulty many had in reconciling the enormity of his crimes with the relative mundanity of his death. The legacy of Adolf Hitler is one of unparalleled evil. His actions led to the deaths of tens of millions of people, the devastation of Europe, and the near annihilation of European Jewry. His death, while bringing closure to the war, did not end the trauma he had inflicted on the world. The horrors of the Holocaust and the war remain etched in the collective memory, serving as a stark reminder of the dangers of totalitarianism, hatred, and unchecked power.
The death of Adolf Hitler on April 30, 1945, marked the end of one of history's darkest chapters. While his death brought an end to the Third Reich, the impact of his dictatorship continues to be felt in the form of the immense suffering caused by the Holocaust and World War II. As we reflect on Hitler's demise, we are reminded of the importance of remembering the past to ensure that such horrors are never repeated. The story of Hitler's life serves as a powerful cautionary tale about the destructive potential of fanaticism, bigotry, and absolute power.